So Rory Stewart, still an MP.
Still an MP.
But not actually at the moment a Conservative MP.
No, and actually not just me, but over 20 people. Winston Churchill's grandson, a lot of ex-ministers, a lot of us who were in the cabinet very recently, now all thrown out of the party.
Ken Clarke,
all of us suddenly
former Chancellor.
Yeah.
Given the enormity of the vote, though, you guys were told that if you did rebel on this, you'd almost certainly lose the whip. You all took a conscious decision to do that. I mean, that is the reality of politics. It probably doesn't get bigger right now than this kind of vote. I mean, is it surprising that the government would do this?
Surprising because it's completely unprecedented. Even Mrs Thatcher, who had very firm views on things, didn't go around deselecting MPs that disagree with her. People like Bill Cash have voted for nearly 40 years against governments on Europe, and nobody's ever tried to deselect
Boris
them as an
Johnson voted against his own government on Europe, against the withdrawal agreement. Do you think the same thing should have happened to rebels like Boris Johnson?
I don't think it should happen to anybody. I don't think it's a good democratic way of behaving.
Is it a hypocritical way of behaving?
Well, the people who should decide whether someone's an MP are their local constituents. If you start controlling it from the centre, you're not really running a democracy.
Right. We are where we are, and there's going to be a vote today which almost certainly will go in favour of the anti-government MPs, which is going to be that they will block a no deal. On the back of that, we expect Boris Johnson to call for an election. The Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer early on this programme, suggesting that they will actually vote against having an election. Where does that leave us? If the Prime Minister is incapable, because of quite new rules put in place by David Cameron, to actually call an election, unless there's a parliamentary majority vote for it, where does that leave us as a country? A paralysed Prime Minister, a paralysed government, not just zero majority, but a -1. And he can't even call an election where people could decide, as you say, whether MPs should stay or go.
I'm with you. And this is why this was always a disastrous strategy. Because it was clear from the beginning there was no majority for a no-deal Brexit in Parliament. There was no way he was going to get a new deal out of Brussels. And he wasn't going to be able to have an election.
But
he was promising 31st of October when he couldn't ever deliver it.
But he's doing it because he knows there's been no majority in Parliament or anything like one for any form of Brexit at all. And there's a growing feeling that Parliament, which is stuffed with 3/4 of people who voted Remain, that they are just intent on stopping Brexit happening.
But of course that isn't true. I mean, of those of us that voted against this, we voted for Brexit again and again. We would have left on the 31st of March. We'd be out now. We'd be halfway through.
The Parliament as an entity didn't.
Parliament as an entity didn't, but the people who really stopped it actually are people like Boris and Jacob Rees-Mogg. We would have been well out of the European Union by now. This is a very strange strategy.
But not in a way that they believe represents what Brexit really is. I mean, Sir Keir Starmer said quite simply, he wants to stay in the single market and customs union, as near as damn
But
it.
nobody in Parliament can decide what sort of Brexit they want, because a lot of the Brexiteers, ERG, voted against the sort of Brexit that Theresa May could come up with, and now the no-deal Brexit is something that there isn't a majority in Parliament for either. Is Brexit going to happen?
I believe Brexit will happen.
When?
And it must happen. But the way to do it is we need to take no deal off the table, and we need to take Remain off the table and concentrate on a deal.
Rory, you're a smart guy, right? You've been in the military, right? The idea that somehow the best negotiating position to get a better deal out of the EU, which we have to do if we're going to get any deal passed by Parliament, because we already know we've tried our best and the current one isn't going to get a vote that works. You keep saying take no deal off the table. No business person I know would ever do that. Why does it help the national interest, as we're still negotiating with the EU, to remove our biggest trump card, which is walking away? Explain to me.
Well, I think there are two things on that. Firstly, Europe is not intimidated by us threatening no deal. We can see that very clearly.
How do you know?
Well, we can see they're not moving at all.
Yeah,
There's been no negotiation.
Nobody moves in these things until the last minute. We know that. We know that the EU in particular, historically, often moves at the very last moment when they really feel all negotiation has been completed.
Would no deal...
Why are we not at least going to the last second?
Because
would no deal damage the EU?
To some extent, but not enough to move them. At the moment,
that's the problem, isn't it?
Not enough to move them. We've been negotiating them 2.5 years. We have a deal. We just have to take that deal through Parliament.
But he won't get through Parliament.
No deal is never going to get through Parliament.
But the current deal on the table has been not just beaten, it's been absolutely annihilated by Parliament.
And the same is true for no deal.
Right. So what deal goes through then?
a better chance of getting the withdrawal agreement through now.
But the only
Labour
deal
is
it
now
seems to me
moving.
that would get through is one that basically isn't Brexit. So when you attack the ERG and Boris and the others, actually they would say what's been on the table does not represent Brexit. If we're still under the control of the EU, and I voted Remain.
Sure.
I don't believe in Brexit.
Sure.
But I do believe in democracy.
Sure.
And what really worries me is that in all this, we're losing track of the fact that if we don't enact the referendum result, that's a massive blow to our democratic system.
Couldn't agree more. We must enact the referendum result, otherwise we're going to alienate more than half the population. But we've also got to do it responsibly and pragmatically, otherwise we're going to alienate half the people who voted Remain. We've got to think about the next 20, 30 years of the country. This is the trading foundations for our nation. If we rush it through with a no-deal Brexit that the majority of this country doesn't want, we'll regret it for 40 years. We've got to return
if you were negotiating with the EU yourself, you'd want no deal as an option, surely.
I would not be wasting a single second negotiating with the European Union. We have a deal. Where the negotiation needs to take place is in Parliament. We need to get Labour to vote for the deal and get the deal that we have through Parliament. We could have left on the 31st of March. We've done it. We could leave tomorrow.
What are you
going to
do yourself? I mean, you're a very popular rising political star.
You were one of the stars of the leadership contest.
They like your candour, they like your video blogs and so on. What are you going to do now you're not a Tory officially?
I'm going to stand as a Conservative until I'm told that I can't do that.
But
haven't you been told you can't
been
do that?
deselected.
If that happens, I'll stand as an independent, but I'm hoping to stand as a Conservative.
What have you been told at the moment?
Only that my whip's been removed. We haven't formally been deselected yet. And I can't believe...
Can you stand without the whip then, or not?
Isn't it?
At the moment, it would be very difficult, but I can't believe they're seriously suggesting that they're going to do something that no government has ever done, which is to deselect more than 20 of their most senior, loyal members of Parliament for voting against them on a
Part of the
single
problem
vote.
with all this, Rory, is that we've become incredibly tribal in this country. I've seen the same thing in America. Trump and Brexit have created tribes, and you're not allowed to deviate from your tribe and its implacable position on things. The kind of coming across the aisle, bipartisan approach is just dead at the moment. How do we get back to being able to debate with people we don't agree with, doing business with people we don't agree with? How do we get rid of this ridiculously hysterical, tribal mentality which is going on?
Well, one problem, I think, must be social media. We're all trapped in our little Twitter worlds or our Facebook worlds where we only talk to people who agree with us. But the second thing is having structures like Parliament that force us to compromise. The great thing about Parliament is, in the end, it's going to force us, I believe, to accept the withdrawal agreement and compromise. When people realise no deal is dead, when they realise the second referendum is dead, we'll compromise.
OK, I hope you're right, Rory Stewart. I really do. And it's good to see you, and congratulations on your award and for joining my club, which is every time you get a GQ Men of the Year award, you immediately lose the job you got it for.
Thank you.
I think it's a fine badge of honour.